As the 6th week of trial begins for Huey Newton, accused of killing an Oakland policeman, spectators and newsmen are searched before entering the courtroom. The dead man, Officer John Frey, was 23. Newton listens carefully, smiles at friends, sometimes holds up the clenched fist of militancy. There is one Negro on the jury, 1 Oriental, 10 whites. Newton calls that proof of racism, systematic exclusion of Negroes. Defense attorney Charles Gary protested that the selection system made a fair trial impossible, but the judge ordered him to proceed. A key witness was Officer Herbert Haynes, wounded the night of the killing last October. He managed to get off at least 1 shot, which wounded Newton. Another state witness, Dell Ross, failed to come through. He told the grand jury Newton forced him at gunpoint to drive to a hospital, but at the trial, Ross claimed he could remember nothing. Bus driver Henry Greer, however, touched Newton on the shoulder and identified him as the man he saw struggle with the slain officer, then shoot him several times. In the Alameda County Jail, Newton talks confidently of a not guilty verdict.
Well, as I said when the case first started, that we were sure that we'd be victorious, and my opinion hasn't changed. We have community support, plus across the country, plus international support, and there's nothing stronger than the people.
3,000 Black Panthers turned out for the start of the trial. Spokesmen say that if Newton is found guilty and given the death penalty, the sentence will have to be carried out over their dead bodies. If there has to be war, said Eldridge Cleaver, the Panther information minister, then let there be war.
Wings to Fly is a children's book about gaining confidence and working to succeed, told from the perspective of a young girl who loves to play basketball. She is often left out by her teammates until she meets her guardian angel, who teaches her that success takes perseverance. Wings to Fly is a great read for all children. I would highly recommend this book. If you would like to make a purchase, please click on the link in my description box below. The morning of Huey's trial, July 15, 1968, about 5,000 demonstrators and over 450 Black Panthers stood outside to show their support. Everybody was chanting, "Free Huey, free Huey, free Huey, set our warrior free." Put it like this: if this happened in today's time, during the social media era, anything with Huey's name attached to it would have had millions of clicks. The Free Huey movement was crazy at that time. Selecting the jury took a long time, about 2 weeks. All in all, 3 panels of prospective jurors. About 180 people were questioned before the jury, and 4 alternates were chosen. Out of nearly 200 people, and only 16 of them were Black. The final jury consisted of 11 whites and 1 Black man named David Harper. And Huey studied David Harper heavily. He found himself paying no attention at all to the testimony, prosecution witnesses, ballistic experts. Not until he took the stand himself, he began talking to the jury, and he felt like Harper had a connection with him. When he finally testified, he directed his words towards Harper. Harper was his audience. An unspoken bond grew between the two. He was convinced that Harper understood him and agreed with him. And he only had a glimmer of hope within the jury, but he never placed much confidence in him for his ability to sway others. In the opening statement to the jury, the prosecutor, Lowell Jensen, said that Huey had murdered Officer John Frey with full intent, and he also shot Officer Herbert Haynes. He said that Huey kidnapped a man named Dell Ross and forced him to take him to the hospital.
The shooting happened at 5 a.m., approximately where I'm standing on 7th Street in the heart of Oakland's Negro ghetto.
A pool of blood marks the spot where 23-year-old Officer John Frey was found fatally wounded from 4 gunshots. Officer Frey, the father of a 3-year-old daughter, had been on the force a little more than a year. Patrolman Herbert Haynes, who came to Frey's aid, is hospitalized in critical condition. He was found nearby, shot 3 times in the chest, arm, and leg. The suspect, charged with murder and attempted murder, is Huey Newton, 25-year-old leader of the Black Panthers for Self-Defense, an Oakland-based group that advocates arming all Negroes against what they call their white oppressors, especially police. The same group caused a storm when they entered the state capitol heavily armed earlier this year to protest anti-gun legislation. Newton is hospitalized in serious condition and under heavy guard. He staggered into Kaiser Hospital at 5:40 this morning with gunshot wounds in the abdomen. It is believed he was wounded by Officer Haynes. Newton was later transferred to Highland Hospital. Because of the condition of the 2 survivors of the pre-dawn shootout, exact details are missing. Police say Newton and an accomplice were in this car when stopped by Officer Frey. The car left at the murder scene is known to be one used by heavily armed Black Panthers to patrol Negro neighborhoods looking for what they say are incidents of police brutality. It is known Officer Frey was able to make several radio transmissions to check on possible warrants for the 2 suspects before he was killed. Newton and his accomplice fled on foot. It is believed Newton commandeered a car to take him to the hospital. Inspector Roland Fort has charge of the investigation.
Police say Officer Frey's murder is the first time an Oakland policeman has been killed in the line of duty in nearly 20 years. A huge manhunt is on for the 2nd suspect in that killing, who is still at large. Ben Williams, KPIX News in Oakland.
He claimed that Huey gave false identification to the first officer who stopped him. And when he was stopped the 2nd time, he gave the correct identification. And as he was arrested, walking towards the car, he pulled a gun and began firing. He claimed that he shot Officer Frey with his own gun. Then he claims that Huey escaped and forced Dell Ross to take him to another location in Oakland. Jensen claimed that Huey had 3 motives. First was because he had a prior conviction for a felony and was on probation. Because of this, he knew that having a concealed weapon would lead to another felony conviction. 2, he claimed that Huey had marijuana in the car. 3 was because of the claim from false identification, which is hilarious because when he was pulled over, the police knew exactly who he was. When he got pulled over, the cop stepped to him with something like, well, what do we have here? The great Huey P. Newton. So they knew who he was. Another matter of concern was whether to reveal to his attorney the name of Gene McKinney, who was the passenger that night the incident went down. You see, Gene was never approached by the police. He was never apprehended. Only when his lawyers had convinced him that legally the prosecution could not do anything to Gene McKinney if he revealed his identity. From Huey's own knowledge of the law, he knew that the courts were powerless to hurt Gene, but Gene was skeptical. When his lawyers finally met with Gene, they carefully explained to him that he could not be hurt by testifying for the defense. And he eventually did testify. The prosecution took about 3 weeks to present its case. They called in about 20 witnesses to the stand. This included people like the nurse who admitted him, the doctor who did the autopsy on Officer Frey, ballistics experts, several people from the police department, and various others from the shooting. The so-called witness who was the bus driver. He got up there and gave a bogus testimony. Huey's attorney found out later on that he was in some type of trouble with the law and he was cooperating to get out of something. On Monday, August 12, 1967, a black man named Dell Ross was about to take the stand. This was the guy who claimed that Huey P. Newton and Gene McKinney kidnapped him right after the shooting. Right after the shooting, he claims that they held him at gunpoint and they told him that he needs to flee the scene. When Dell Ross was questioned, he responded, "I refuse to answer on the grounds it will tend to incriminate me." Everyone was shocked because this was a victim, a supposed to be victim, not a defendant. So why is he pleading the fifth? Come to find out, he had lied due to police intimidation. And they also had something on him. Parking tickets. This man was willing to do great damage to Huey P. Newton, a black man at that, over some parking tickets. On the morning of August 22nd, Huey finally took the stand. And Huey calmly answered the questions and denied everything that he needed to deny. No matter how out of pocket the courtroom got, Huey remained calm. The jury deliberated for a few days, from September 5th until September 8th. Many people wondered what the Black Panthers would do when the verdict came down. The brothers had already said sky was the limit if they did not free Huey. So everyone was contemplating, everyone was worried and afraid if Huey was not a free man, that it was going up.
The long-awaited decision in the Huey Newton murder trial, which has drawn worldwide attention, is now very near. The jury of 7 women and 5 men are deliberating the fate of the Black Panther leader on the 8th floor of that building. It is their job to decide whether he is guilty of killing Oakland policeman John Frey and wounding Officer Herbert Haynes in a pre-dawn shootout last October 28th. 2 floors above the jury in his cell, Huey Newton, who has made almost no show of emotion during the 8 weeks of trial, calmly awaits the decision of the jury. I talked to Newton in the jail.
As far as the proceedings thus far, that the courts have only reflected the racist attitude of the general power structure, that I haven't received a fair trial, that I should not have been indicted in the first place. I was indicted by a blue ribbon grand jury, a middle-class white grand jury that did not represent a cross-section of the community.
But when it was time for the verdict, it was manslaughter. And Huey sent a message to the community after he had the chance to analyze the verdict. This was his statement. The question has been asked, what do I think of the verdict? What do I think of the jury? I think the verdict reflected the racism that exists here in America and that all black people are subjected to. Some specific things I would like to say about certain people on the jury first. Brother Harper and other members of the jury who believed in my innocence owed an obligation to me and the black community to adhere to their convictions that I was not guilty.